Dance Music Secrets with Kevin Mackay.
Hello and welcome to Dance Music Secrets. This is our first episode and our first guest is Saranne Tardelli-Reid. How are you doing, Saranne?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
So Saranne is an expert in sample clearance. If I was running the biggest label in the world and the advice to people running labels is always hire the best, she is the person that I would hire.
What a compliment.
But why don't you tell us a bit yourself about where you're at now, and then we'll delve a bit deeper into your journey.
Okay, well, it's been a long journey. I started sample clearance, I would say 25 years ago. Just making me look old. Largely because we, at the time, were running an independent label. And
so we as...
which was Skint. So it was JC, Tim, Damien, a bunch of us all together. And it was a sort of a big explosion in dance music at that time, and artists were using samples. And I think before that, you know, there was a lot of hip hop and stuff like that where people were sampling each other, but it was the Wild West. There were like no rules, there were no laws, and people were just very freely using it. And actually, I think there was a bit of a, between artists, a bit of a, it's okay, you can use mine and I'll use yours. But then I think, like with anything, people saw pound signs and went, oh, actually, I know, if we get like behind this, we can license the music and then we can make money out of it. And whenever any money can be made, things get more serious. And so we were signing a lot of sample-based acts, biggest one being Fatboy Slim.
Yeah.
And we had recently done a JV with Sony where they required us to clear all the rights legally, so that everything was okay copyright-wise. And there was no one to help us out. So we asked the label, and they were like, this is how we do it. So I set up an agency specifically to focus on clearing those rights. And it was great because the first deals we did, I think we were making the rules and making the law. So it was like it was a great thing to do and great to be part of. Although now obviously things have escalated hugely, and now the deals that are being done are not representative of how they were in any way whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, we can get onto that later, but yeah, I think that it has changed remarkably since you were clearing them in the 90s, and I didn't really get into it until I started working with Milo, because my label was so small, and I honestly didn't know some of the samples were samples, because when I made music, I made it so honestly. I didn't steal someone else's music, but there was loads of artists who just didn't care, and they were just doing that. But yeah, so yeah, you started you were involved in Loaded Records, which then became Skint, or they then set up Skint. So yeah, take us a bit further from there.
So we set up the agency because, as I say, there were so many sample-based acts, and actually the agency became really successful because all the labels around that time were also having the same problems.
Yeah.
So the agency seemed to be a font of knowledge, and the more we did it, the more we understood about it. And at that time, we were very much doing deals that were based on the actual usage of the sample, and it was very much a fairness thing rather than a money-making thing. And I think it was a sort of universal understanding between the people we were clearing with and the rights owners and everything. Let's be fair about this.
Yeah.
But that has wildly changed now because of the ways that we make money now in music. Obviously, that's now a massive income stream. But yeah, so it sort of started it, and then it snowballed. And then I think a lot of artists then thought, oh, this is okay. Like, now we can sample, and now we can legitimately put things through as long as we just clear it.
Yeah. There was. I mean, there was the time of Milo, so the mid 2000s. It felt very much like you can sample something massive like an 80s pop hit, like Waiting for a Star to Fall, like Milo did, and you can contact the writers, and they might need a bit of like cajoling or even explaining what on earth like a mashup is or whatever, but you could get there, and they would, some of them would be reasonable. I mean, a lot of them would ask for 100% of your writing, but there would be some who would be like, we did one with George Duke and he only took 40%. And it was like, oh, wow, that's really, and at the time Milo was tiny. So tell us what happened after sample clearance services, you've been running that all the time, but when you sort of changed and you went back to uni?
One of the things that came out of Skint and also and out of Sample Clearance was that fundamentally everything is a contract. And actually, without an in-depth understanding of a contract, both businesses would have fallen down. So I went to night school and I trained to be a lawyer, which was actually one of the best things I've ever done, because a fundamental understanding of how things work, how rights work, how money works, how things are exploited is really important in music.
Absolutely.
And so I went painstakingly, and it took a long time because I was working in the day and had thousands of kids as well. So it took a long time to qualify, but I went through to, so I went to uni, then I went back to law school, then I went and did a training contract in a firm, and then I qualified. That seems like a very long time ago now. And that was important, I think, because every deal we did has a contract, and actually being able to advise people on these the deal terms and this is how it works contractually was a big part of that business.
Yeah, and also, the things that can go wrong if the contract is missing things or the contract doesn't cover things. Like, these are things which, all the kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's might seem, everyone's being really cool here. But if something goes wrong, then everyone stops being really cool and you're sitting in front of a judge and you need that piece of paper needs to be like...
I think it's very easy to hide things in contracts. Somebody might go, oh, it's just a 2-page contract, it's fine. And you look at it and go, oh, it looks all right to me. But actually it's very easy to hide. And a number in a contract can mean a lot or a very little bit. And to a layman's eyes, they look at something, oh, 20% looks all right to me. But actually that might be 20% of all the revenue that you make, and that's a big difference.
Absolutely.
So I think there's not a lot of advice for artists and stuff when they don't have a lawyer or can't pay a lawyer, and they get a contract from a smaller label or they get a sample agreement from somewhere, and they just want to sign it because they don't. What do I do? I can't pay a lawyer to look at this. I can't really understand it myself. And there's not really anywhere to go for someone to run through it. I know the MU Musicians Union do a bit, but it's actually quite difficult for people to...
It's not easy, and you have situations where, it's becoming less so now, but you do get unscrupulous labels who will send artist contracts knowing full well that they are onerous, unfair, and at some point the artist will look at them and hate their guts for even offering it to them, because what they've done is royally stiff them on a number of levels.
But quite often they don't know that until much later. My son actually made a record and got it signed on. I can't say the label that he got signed to, but it was an indie label, and he was delighted. And he came home and he went, Mummy, I've got it signed. And then I looked at the contract and I was like, you can't sign that one. And he was mortified. He was like, but it's the big label and they want to sign me. And I was like, but look at the terms. And I went through the terms with him and his artist partner at the time. And they just wanted to sign it because they wanted to be associated with that label, even though the terms of that deal were horrendous.
Happens all the time.
They were going to make nothing out of that deal, but they were so excited about being signed to a label. And I think that's much the case for young artists who just want to get signed.
Yeah, but before you know it, it's 10 years later, it's done 500 million streams, and you tot up how much money that has gone to the label and how much money has gone to the artist, and unscrupulous labels can end up hoovering up 95, 96, 99% of that money, which is a real shame.
That is never a truer word, then. Never a truer word.
So, when people ask me what's the best advice to give a young artist, I'm like, The Music Business by Donald S. Passman. Buy that book, read it as much as you can, and at least have an understanding of what's going on. If you were to offer somebody, what's the best legal book that you've...
Probably that one. I read that years and years ago. Somebody said to me, I'll read this book. And I was like, okay. And I read it. And at the time, it wasn't 100% meaningful because it's very difficult the knowledge we have over however many years has come from working in the industry, working at different parts of the industry. But actually, for someone new, the difference between publishing royalties and recording royalties are not something that's widely, they don't understand. They won't understand. Why could they? Why should they? So, you can read the book and it is a really good book to read, but you probably just need to ask people. That you probably know lots of people in the music industry, and at any opportunity, just ask.
It's very true.
The more information you get, the better.
I'm terrible at asking for help, so I went to a book first. But like that's probably much better advice to build a network of people, and because you're all going to have the same. If you're all artists at a similar level, you're all going to have the same issue. Oh, I've got a contract. What do I do? This contract looks way different from this contract. How do I know which one's good, which one's bad? Are they all bad? Like all these questions.
Don't get me wrong. The book is great. It's a great foundation.
Yeah.
But if you don't understand everything in the book, then use that as the foundation and then ask.
Yeah, no, I think my experience of artists is that you're more likely to get the knowledge from asking. So I think your advice is probably better than mine. Anyway, so you, as well as, so after you went back to law school, because you've also, what's great about you is you've seen both sides of the coin. So you worked at an indie, and clearing samples for someone like Fatboy Slim, it can't be any more interesting in terms of sample clearance than that. I can't imagine. But then you've gone and worked for EMI, Positiva, Universal. You've seen that side of the business. So tell us a little bit about your journey in the major labels.
The difference between majors and indies. I mean, indies for me are where you should work, because it's a family. It is, you're all helping each other out. You've probably got 5 hats on. You're probably, the lawyer, the licensing, the person doing coffee. You've got lots of hats on it, but it's very collaborative. And in my experience, it's a collaborative
I think so.
thing. You live and die for each other. You actually spend a lot of time together, as much as you do in the label as out of the label. So I think you're all working towards a common goal, because, your success is, I remember when we had a couple of number ones and we all went out and celebrated together, and it was like, yay! And you feel like you've worked together to achieve that.
Yeah, you're part of that number one. Yeah. And everyone wants to make, you feel part of it.
100%. Whereas I feel like in a major label, I mean, not to take things away, I mean, it's great to work in a major label, don't get me wrong. And for everyone, it's a huge opportunity to get in, because you can learn so much. But I don't think it's quite the same. I think you're a cog in a big machine.
Yeah.
And I don't think that you get the same level of you feel like you are actually part of every number one that they make.
Yeah.
And it's fast and it's quick in and out. So you don't even get to celebrate the number ones. They come, it's like today, and the next day is another one. And they work at a very fast pace. Whereas I think indies have time to go, we've worked it, we celebrate it, yay, and we'll wait for the next one. But majors are much harder.
And did you do the same thing, or did you have to have a wider scope? What did you do? What did you do at the majors compared to what you did?
So in the major label, I was specifically legal and business affairs. So it was very much a job that was based around working on artist deals, artist contracts, and then anything else the artist chose to do. Interviews, competitions, whatever. And you're also part of building the artist profile. Because they work closely with the marketing team will work with us and the finance team on how much you want to spend. So it's a broader role, but in a business sense. Whereas I think in an indie, it's a friendship role, and you're part of every single bit of that job, which I think is...
Yeah, I guess you see the whole picture as well. Whereas you don't, from my experience of talking to people that have worked in majors, it can be quite insular. You can have an understanding of your area, and it may be a little bit, like you said, outside of it, but not the whole picture.
Yeah, I think you work. You work across lots of artists at the same time, and you work internationally with those artists, but it's very time sensitive all the time, and the pressure is quite tough, because the pressure is put on by the label. They put its own pressure on. For some unknown reason, they'll go, how long will it take for this to work? And we'll go like 3 months, and then they'll go, let's do it in 2. It's bizarre. Okay, let's do that. Let's put everyone under that pressure.
Yeah, but
let's do it in 2.
It's the Steve Jobs way of doing things. You'd be like, they'd be like, how long is it going to take to develop this tech? 8 weeks. No, we're going to do it in 24 hours starting now.
It's bonkers.
And then they'll make mistakes, but then they will get to an iteration that won't be 24 hours, but they'll get there. Plus they'll also, I guess the finance people will be like, well, we discussed the difference between new catalogue and old catalogue. So they're trying to get the new catalogue as quickly as possible to make the money.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed earlier on. There's a big difference between how music is exploited now and the deals that we do with artists now, or we were doing in Universal, were very much shorter term deals, and I think that's the way now with all artists. Is when they're signing to major labels, they're signing much shorter deals. Years and years ago, you'd sign for life of copyright, or you'd sign in for, I don't know, 5 albums, which could take 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years.
So you've got that catalogue, and you can keep on exploiting that catalogue, and that was like that's the crux of your business. Whereas nowadays, you're signing those deals for a year, 3 years.
Artists don't want to give that time.
They don't.
The labels aren't showing that they're developing. So I guess it's like a chicken and egg thing. If one of the majors decided to be, you know what, we're going to go back to the 70s because Queen, Fleetwood Mac, they're artists that have lasted much longer than maybe some of the ones we signed in the 2010s to 2020s. But anyway, we'll get on to more of that later. But we were talking, I mean, this is about sample clearance.
Yeah.
So let's go and have a very basic overview of sampling for people who are just getting right at the start of their artist journey. How would you answer the question, what is sampling and how is it dealt with in the music business?
Okay, well, from a legal perspective, there are 2 copyrights. So when an artist samples another artist's track, there are usually 2 copyrights. The copyright in the master recording, which is usually owned by the record label, and the copyright in the underlying composition, which would be usually owned by the writers or the publisher of that music. And they're very distinct rights, and they have different income streams. So when an artist samples something, they have to approach both of those rights holders. The record label will usually ask for, depending on the size of the sample, depending on how big the artist is that's being sampled, depending on the sampling artist, a number of factors will go into that, and they will usually ask for an advance and a royalty, an ongoing royalty. On the publishing side, the publisher or the writers will ask the sampling artist for a percentage of copyright. And something that's quite new really now is that the publishers will ask for a non-recoupable advance.
Yeah.
This is something that's come from America. And that will be, I think, is a liberty, frankly, because they're already getting a share of copyright for the sample, and now they're asking for a non-recoupable fee.
But do you think that's because songwriters are really underpaid or undervalued at the moment in the music business?
No, because I think that goes directly to the publisher, largely to recoup balances. So it doesn't go near the.
Do you not think the split though from Spotify is quite poor in the songwriters?
I do. I think songwriters are. I think the non-recoupable fee. But if that were the case, why do they not just ask for a bigger copyright split?
Well, because even 100% isn't paying them enough. That's my gut feeling.
For the sample.
Yeah, that's why publishers are asking for the money.
I think they're asking for the money as just an additional income stream. I think they generally ask for quite a high copyright split for samples anyway.
Right, okay.
And they're just asking for an additional fee. But the problem is the sampling artist can't recoup that fee. So he's got to find $2,500, $5,000 from.
Do record labels cover that and make it recoupable?
So record labels sometimes, major labels will cover that.
Right.
Indie labels haven't got any money. They're not covering that fee. Where are they going to get that money from? They're already struggling to cover the master one.
So they're like, oh, it's $5,000 non-recoupable fee. Then I'm like,
it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
I've got to think you're making a really big tune here.
It's got to be a huge tune.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's a lot of money. Yes. I mean, I think my experience is that indie labels struggle to cover it.
Right. Okay.
Distros won't cover it.
Yeah.
So it falls on the artists, and lots of dance music now comes out through distros because the deal's better. So I think it's a struggle for artists. I think on the master side, you can, if it's a very high fee, you can look at replaying if you're not precious about the artist that you're sampling, which will reduce your fee generally. But I think if you've coughed up for the master fee,
if we just go into replaying just quickly in case someone doesn't know what a replay is.
Okay, a replay is literally somebody taking the original sample and then making a new version of it using new instruments, new singers. So that master is a new master and therefore doesn't require clearance. And
that can sound exactly the same, or it can sound very, very close to the original recording that you've sampled.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I mean, there's some instances where you can't use a replay, like in film, for example. But if you're...
So in music, the replay can sound as close to the original as possible, and a good replay house will make that happen.
Yeah.
A lesser replay house will make something, maybe have less instruments or not a French horn from 1970. So, that it may sound different, but that much the decision of the artist of how close you want that to sound. But quite often the master rights holders and the publishing rights holders are different. So you can replay the master and then just clear the publishing, especially if you want to keep the cost down.
But if they're the same, sometimes...
you're stuffed.
So we won't give clearance on publishing unless you use our master, because they know they want to earn off of both sides. I didn't...
And there are a number of labels. There's a big Canadian label that do that.
I can imagine exactly which one that is.
Yeah, that is very, very, very tough on that, and will only clear the publishing on the basis that you also clear the master, and on the master side they'll ask for a percentage of gross fees. So it's gross income.
So DJ fees, that kind of thing.
No, not DJ fees, but it'll be gross income on syncs, on everything. So it'll be and they want a large share. So it's quite an unfair structure for me, but.
Yeah, sometimes I get samples in at the label and I just say, you know what, it's better not sampling that. What you've done isn't enough. You've not sort of taken the essential hook from this song, so just find another hook.
Yeah.
Because you've sampled something that's just it's just going to be a headache for you.
I think one of the biggest problems I've found for my clients is where, especially in dance, is where artists use effectively put a new spin on an old record, and it's a remix.
Stick a kick drum under it.
And
the critics say, "Oh, you've just stuck a kick drum under it." I mean, often that's not the case, but to the untrained ear, that's what it can sound like.
I mean, there is new creative endeavour that goes into every remix or everything, but in terms of the rights holders, that is not remunerated. That their thing is, well, we will take a large percentage of the track, and if you're looking at someone taking pretty much all of the artist royalty and a 15k advance on the master side and then 100% on the publishing side, it's difficult to make a record that's going to make money.
Yeah, so it's almost better with the situation which I've seen with some majors where they go, oh, we're not going to consider this a sample. This is a remix. You give it to us. We'll give you $1,500. We own this forever. And if it does 100 million streams, then we get a nice pat on the back. And you get the uplift of having a tune that's done 100 million streams backed by a major. But you take your $1,500 and be thankful for it.
I mean, that is one way of doing it.
No, I've seen that. I've seen that offer though, and I've turned it down.
Atlantic will do that. Atlantic will,
if
Atlantic think it's a remix, they'll go, Saranne, it's not a sample, it's a remix. I already know that, but I'm hoping they'll clear it's a sample, and then they will take ownership of it. And in fact, Universal do it as well. They'll take ownership of a very large remix, and then they'll license it back to the artist.
Yeah,
but actually, they ask for a fee
from the artist.
For a fee to license it back to them. Yeah.
Oh, for them to, if they want to use it for what kind of thing, like on their album or that kind of thing. Right, okay. And so is there a legal difference then between a sample and a remix?
So, for example, if something is cleared as a remix, then they'll just, and the label don't take, so sorry, let me make that more clear. If we've got a track and it's pretty much a remix, and lots of the tracks that come into us for sample clearance are pretty much a remix, and I do have to say to the clients, it's sounding a little bit like a remix. They might want.
Okay, so a remix would be like using all of the master, so like verse, chorus, using multiple
it's not even necessarily all of the master, but it's a large chunk or all of the hook.
And they haven't added any new music. The music is similar, so they say they keep the same chord progression. They haven't flipped that vocal, so they've taken a vocal and put it over a completely different beat, or does that even matter?
Even if they just if they use a full vocal over an entirely different beat, it's still considered a remix.
Right, okay.
Because the hook, the record as they understand it, is what will sell. The vocal is what will sell. So if you've got Lolita Holloway and you've banged her over an entirely different it's whatever, it doesn't. It's still a remix. Yeah, it's still heaps of that. And for remixes, they will, in that instance, if you've got an entirely different instrumental, they'll clear it as a sample, albeit a remix, and they will do it at, it'll be a 10 to 15k advance against a royalty of probably 10 to 15%.
Right, okay.
And that, so you're lucky, at least then you get ownership of it, and then you pay the advance and royalty. Publishing will always be 100% on those. So steep. So with remixes, the more you want to put in there to change that, the better deal you'll get.
Can you tell us some of what was the most interesting thing, or what was the most remarkable thing when you were clearing those samples?
I don't know how much I can say, actually. In terms of, one of the things I can say is that we did a deal. We got great terms from the deal. And the record then went on to be an absolute smash.
Right, okay.
It was #1 single, #1 album. And the record was just one of the biggest records. And the royalty and advance we had negotiated wasn't particularly great for the artist. So we were allowed to go back.
For the sampled artist?
Yeah. So we were allowed to go back and give them a better share.
Oh, that was nice.
I think that.
And how did that go? So this must have been through an indie then? It must have been.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the indie had cleared it at X rate.
Yeah.
And just because that's what you'd asked for?
Yeah. That's what they asked for.
Oh, that's what they asked for.
Yeah, so we cleared it at that rate. But because it was such a massive international smash, we went and gave them a better rate.
Something that would never happen at a major label.
Never happen. I don't think ever anywhere in the world. But
No,
that
I can say
came from the artist, and they wanted to remunerate.
I've seen
the
situations
sampled
where
artist.
I've seen situations where that's happened, and I've said to the artist, listen, I think this has worked out not that fair on this person. We didn't know it was going to be this big, and looking at it, we should give them a bit more. And one time the artist has agreed with me, another time the artist has not agreed. So I guess you can find out more about people in those situations where you think this just doesn't sit right with me and we should do something about it. So that's really interesting.
It's a funny role for me, because having been in music all my life and been around artists, and my daughter's a DJ and my son's an artist. As a lawyer, you want to get the best deal possible for your client.
Yeah.
But also the other side of me is going, yeah, but is that actually really fair? Do I want to get a deal like that? Because it's that fair on the artist. And so there's a fine line between what I think is. But I will say to my clients, I don't think that's a particularly fair deal. If they say, I want you to get this deal, I'll say, well, maybe we can, maybe we can't, but I don't think that's particularly fair for all parties.
Yeah, I mean, if you study negotiation, they'll tell you that the fairest deal is the one that both parties look back on and they both
feel a pinch.
Yeah, neither of them hate it, neither of them love it.
Yeah.
And so that's, for me, I'm always trying to find that sweet spot, because you never know when that person at the other side of the deal is going to come back and then be in charge of something that you really want to work, and they hate you for it, and they don't want to work with you because of how it's a
small industry.
It is.
So that's one of the things I learned very early on. So you think when you first come into it, you think, oh, it's huge, and then as you grow into it, it's a very small industry, and the same people you come back work with over and over and over again. So don't make enemies earlier on.
And culturally, it's quite different though, because the industry has some main power countries, the UK and the US being two of them. How do you find that difference between the UK and the US in terms of what is an acceptable deal and what's not an acceptable deal? And
so the US ramp things up. They ramp everything up. The non-recoupable fees came from the US, and actually the UK take their lead from the US, and especially the major labels do.
Right. Okay.
So any deal structure happens in the US and then filters through to the UK, and then fundamentally
that becomes the law. That becomes the way things are done.
Exactly.
Standards.
And they're litigious. They want as much money as quick as possible. They'll sue for anything. So it's a very different way of thinking over there. And sometimes I think it doesn't need to be that aggressive. But that's the way it is. I can't change the way that all the Americans think.
Well, I think that leads us on. That's really interesting. Leads us on to the point that I wanted to talk about, because often I'm dealing with artists and they say, oh, it's fine. It's under 7 seconds or it's under 2 seconds. You don't need to clear the sample. So let's have a legal sort of viewpoint on that. I know what I think, but you tell me, what is the point where you need to clear a sample?
You just always need to clear samples. You just do. On the master side, whether it's half a second, if it's taken from a master recording, it is copyrightable.
But that's different in the UK and Europe. There are certain things which are considered, you can sample, like a single hit, if it's like a snare drum or a single chord. From
a snare drum or a single chord, but if you've taken it from an original recording, it is copyrightable.
Yes, no, I know.
If you go away and sample a snare drum or a kick, and the idea of it came from somewhere else, it's fine, because there's nothing recognisable in that makes that original.
Someone's not going to spot you, basically. But if an American label could prove that that's what you did, if you went on YouTube,
I don't know how they would prove that, but if they could,
there's so many producers that are now live streaming their production. So say you went in and said, there's records that we sampled. I'm not going to give Milo away, but there's some records, there's a snare drum sampled in one of his tracks, and I know where it came from. I know the master it came from. And if I did that, and then there could be a US label that said, you've just, here's the proof. He said that that's what had happened, and we want our share.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's lots of sounds that exist in the world which can be made anywhere. That can be made, there are presets in a production thing. Now, that sound isn't distinguishable in any way. So if you use that sound, you are able to. But if it's taken from an actual recording, then the copyright exists in the recording.
Right. Okay.
Now, whether that could be, if you'd had taken just a kick or just a snare from a recording, whether that could be traceable is anyone's guess.
Within the sample process as a record label, I've often employed musicologists. Why don't you tell us what a musicologist is?
I mean, a musicologist will analyse music, and they can break it down bit by bit, note by note. I'm not a musicologist.
No, I know, but
in fact, we use musicologists.
So tell us the situation when you would use a musicologist. What would you use them for? And that might give us a bit better context.
A musicologist for us, or certainly at the time in Universal, we use musicologists a lot. And actually, when I was working at Concord before that, we also, more on the publishing side, I think, we use musicologists a lot. So we would use them. One, if we had an infringement claim in, so if somebody said, you've used our music, and we would listen to it, and if it sounded a bit like it, not like it, whatever, we would then refer that to a musicologist to say what the chances this has been sampled. And he would then break it down note by note, chord by chord, and tell you. And they do a little graph that shows you exactly when the two tracks are the same or not the same, which is really interesting. And then they will break it down in a written format so that you can then produce that to the other side and say, this is what our musicologist told us. I think most people with an ear for music can hear a sample.
Yeah.
Whether that is a replay or not is I couldn't tell you. So that's when we'd refer it to a musicologist. Or sometimes, especially on the publishing side, where there are a lot more disputes than on the recorded side, it's whether something, the note order, is allowed to be copyrightable, because there are some orders of notes that aren't allowed to be copyrighted because they're commonplace.
Yeah, so we've had reports back from musicologists going, you've used this chord progression and it is used in hundreds of songs. I'm going to give you 10 examples so that if you got me into court, if you're saying that this is like original, I'm going to give you 10 examples where I'm going to prove that these chords that you think you've written are not that original, because hundreds of artists have thought of the same, because they're common chords.
Exactly, and that happens a lot, and it's a publishing issue rather than a recording issue. And when I worked in publishing for a short time, that was the issue. When things would come in, we go, is it original? Has it been used before? And then you'd go to your musicologist and they go, no, it's been used 8 million times before. And you're, okay.
It's the ones that haven't been used that many times are the ones I find really interesting.
Few and far between. And something you think is really, really original invariably isn't.
Yeah, so one I found, which I thought was amazing, was Chris Isaak, Wicked Game. You ever done it? So there's only one track that I've found so far, and I need to speak to my musicologist for this. But Lana Del Rey's Blue Jeans is the only other song which uses the same underlying chord progression as that song.
Wow.
Even though Wicked Game is such an iconic song, you'd have thought, surely this would have inspired, or this style of chord progression would have inspired more songs, but no, not that I've found as of yet.
Well, I mean, there are some things, and there's hundreds of, court cases for things. I mean, Ed Sheeran had a recent one, didn't he? Hundreds of ones where they say this is it, and it goes through lengthy litigation, and then the result is, but I think in that one, it came out that he hadn't used it in the end. So
Yeah.
so it's I think to the common ear, you can first listen to it and go, is it, isn't it? And then, if you want to make a basis of a claim, you will need a musicologist to support what your assumption is.
Yeah, so the reason we were talking about musicologist was with sampling, my understanding of sampling in the UK and European law is that non-contiguous samples from a single master recording were allowed. And we've had situations where I've had a musicologist give me an opinion as the record label owner that taking one chord, like a G major chord from this part of the song, and then taking a C major chord from the other part of the song, and then shuffling them around and making your own rhythm with those two samples doesn't constitute infringement. I'm sure American lawyers would disagree with that, but that's...
I think if you take it from the original recording,
Yeah.
then it is copyrightable. If you take the sound and recreate that sound,
Right, okay.
and you could take 5 elements from the recording and recreate them,
No, we took
then
them from,
it's not copyrightable.
we took them from the original recording, but I know the American lawyers of that project did not like that.
No, I think if it's taken from the original recording, the recording itself is copyrightable, and every element of that recording is copyrightable.
Yeah.
So if you're taking elements directly from the recording, they're copyrightable. Different on the publishing side.
Different on the publishing side. So that still exists. So so a famous case is the Daft Punk One More Time, where Daft Punk sampled Eddie John's Spell on You, and they took chords from different parts of the song and they made their own chord progression from it. And to some musicologists, that what they've done with the master recording is legal, but in other cases, because it was proven that that's exactly how they did it. It wasn't, someone was able to buy Eddie John's catalogue and then make a claim against them for copyright infringement.
Yeah, I mean, on the publishing side, you can take as much information as you want and then reorder it. If it's not in the same order, it's going to be difficult to say there's an infringement claim, because you're changing the creative endeavour. What's copyrightable is the creative endeavour, the process in which you've reached that laid down notes, chords, whatever. If you change that, then unless you haven't changed it enough and it's still recognisable as coming from the original writers,
then
it's a new copyright.
Yeah. So I guess that's it. If you're sampling something and you're sampling a master recording, loads of people will go and sample beats from records from the 70s, things that have been recorded in really nice studios that no one does now. But if someone can spot where it's from, or if you're going to go on to Who Samples and you're going to find your record on there, then
they're very good at putting your record up there, aren't they?
They are amazing.
Just in case you thought you thought you could fly under the radar. There's a whole website will tell you won't be able to.
I know, it's incredible. Some of the spots that they've got, you're like, wow, that is, they've really, they've
really exposed a lot of people.
Have you found that? Have you found claims coming in after that?
Publishers use that a lot.
Amazing.
They do, which I think was not the intention of the site. But
no,
I think is
like a nerd thing, and now it's turned into like a money thing.
Yeah, wherever there's money. Because obviously infringement claims for publishers on things like that it's just a platform full of them. Here you go. Here's a list of samples that's been sampled, of course, and because there's so much money in infringements, because they generally settle out of court, but they settle for an amount of money, and in America they have damages as well. So it's a lot of money.
I mean, I guess a lot of artists looking at that are going to go, right, samples, and just want to avoid that. And recently,
They don't. A lot of artists do not avoid samples.
No, I know.
If you look in the top 10, top 20, top 50, from every genre, whether it is dance, whether it is rap, whether it's garage, drum and bass, everyone, even just straight pop, everyone uses samples.
Yeah.
When I was at Universal, I worked across all their catalogues, and every artist would be using samples. So it's widely prevalent.
And so what you're saying, if anything comes from any master recording, would a label like that then ask producers to show proof of work?
So at Universal, with where the samples are used, quite often we would replay if the artist is happy for that to happen. We would replay because the advances that were asked are very high for the sampled artists. So we would replay on the master side, and if it's a track that's come in and already produced and made and ready, and it's got samples in, then yes, we'd ask the producer for a warranty to say there's no samples in there, because so many times there are. So many times they go, no, there's no samples in there, and then they would come back.
And is that normally enough? If they've got to sign their name on something I certify that there's no samples, then you can sue me if there are. Like that's roughly that's a rough idea of a warranty.
I mean, the truth is that they give the warranty, and actually, in the event that an infringement claim then comes in, they haven't got the money to.
Yeah. So is labels happy with that?
No.
So labels. That's what I'm saying. So the labels then ask to see proof of work. Okay, where did this? Can you break down this master recording?
No, they don't. They take a warranty. They sign a producer agreement. They take the warranty and the indemnity.
That's my experience, yes.
And then they worry about the infringement if and when it comes.
Because legally they're covered, so they've done the right thing.
They've done the right thing.
As far as like being like, in the legal.
Yeah, they've done their due diligence, and I don't think you could ask for any more than that, in truth, because they've got a lot of works going through their.
Okay, so even though artists are still sampling, in the last 10 years, we've seen the rise of sample libraries offering Splice, LoopCloud, people like that, offering artists the ability to sample without paying any royalty. And we were talking before about some of the issues that are coming up because of that. So do you want to give us a brief overview of these companies and some of the issues that you've seen or you've experienced or you've come across?
There are issues with smart sample libraries. I think on a very basic level, a sample library where they've just essentially giving you access to presets or is a great thing for a new DJ, someone just starting out making money and making music. I think they're really good to build your library of sounds. I think when it actually comes to sort of proper recordings, there are some problems. Some of the libraries have licensed the original recordings in and then licensed them to the end user, but there are problems with how long those licenses last and what happens in the event those licenses come to an end, which they do and have done. There's also problems where the rights owner will also be licensing at the same time. So there are problems with limitations on when something's coming out and can I have an exclusivity period? Oh no, you can't, because somebody else has just licensed it through the platform. So there are inherent problems with those things. I think also there are problems with the royalties. The royalties that they ask quite often are not royalty free, but they ask for a percentage of gross revenue over a certain amount of streams. Now, if you're only putting out a few records, great.
Yeah.
If you actually want to release it commercially, and if it does really well and it's picked up by someone else, then they're not a great deal, because then you're giving a large chunk of your revenue back to those libraries. So there are problems, and you should read terms and conditions very carefully.
And they update the terms and conditions. So one thing to do is make sure you've got a copy of the terms and conditions when you've downloaded the sample, if you're going to use one from a certain library.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, but it's royalty free, because they've told you at that time it's royalty free. Make sure you download a copy of them. I've got multiple copies.
Also, it's royalty free on how many tracks can I put out and it be royalty free? Is it that actually if it kicks off and it does really well, that it then becomes royalty bearing? So you need to read. I mean, it's horrible because those terms and conditions are always really
it's 18
dense
pages
and teeny weeny writing, and even I look at it and go, phew. And I've done it myself. I buy things online and go, oh, T's and C's tick. And actually those things, that's what carries the weight.
Yeah.
And in terms of music and artists, you could be giving away a large percentage of your income, which, they're not making any income, so they really need to hold on to what they've got.
No, but also it still feels unfair. You've paid your subscription for that service, and they've told you, and you've done it based on the fact that you are not going to have to pay a royalty because you're paying the subscription for it. So I'm kind of like, well, you're kind of paying a royalty, and the person who created that sample pack is getting paid.
Yeah.
But you haven't realised that the idea you're getting to use this without paying a royalty has some limitations.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple that have come up. I was really interested to get your kind of legal opinion on it. So one was that performance royalties. So artists get performance royalties when their records that they've performed on are played on the radio, so people will know that as neighbouring rights or PPL.
PPL, yeah.
As far as I understood it, you cannot sign those rights away. So as if you've recorded for something that then goes on to a sample library, surely you should be able to claim your performance royalties if that's your voice.
So it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's one of the things that has come into effect in sample licenses these days, which never was in times gone by. Performance royalties were never even a consideration. And nowadays, when you clear a sample, they will ask for a share of performance royalty.
Yeah, people sampled Milo. I was like, well, why are you getting all of that? There's no way you're getting all of that. That's become a big part of the income.
Yeah. So now, if it's a large sample, they'll ask for 45% of the PPL. And that is, that's a change in licenses, which was never even a consideration. But they've gone, wait a minute, there's another income stream.
But it is true. But it is like that's the performer. So
and the performer is featuring on a new track, so
they are still the performer on that track. So it's
especially when they're when it's a big vocal. I think.
Yeah.
It's more of a, I don't know whether when it's a very tiny sample.
Yeah.
It's a much of a muchness, but I think when there's a big vocal in there.
But I mean, if Simon Cowell's getting paid for playing a triangle on a One Direction record, then surely if you've sampled...
He's just a shrewd man, right?
Yeah.
No creative artistic endeavour going on there. He's just a shrewd man.
Well, that's understanding how the music business works and making sure that that takes it to the nth degree. I'm not sure,
there's a big line, isn't there? There's a big line between people who are very shrewd and very business-minded. And it's always been the same in the music industry. If you watch films, any music industry film, there'll be this big man in a suit, who was making his money, who was shrewd and on the business side. And then there's the artist going, floating around in their creative world.
So what's your job here? I'm the executive producer.
Exactly.
What does that mean? I turn up at the studio once a day and have a listen.
And get paid.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be anywhere there's money.
Yeah.
There are going to be good and bad. And it's a shame that a lot of artists who are very creative minded not 100%, but some are not as business minded as others. And you just need to be careful. You need to be.
So when you say, so the reason I say this is because, like, as a performer, you shouldn't be able to. When they set up the Public Performance Limited, where artists would get a percentage of income from radio, and you couldn't sign that away. So it meant that labels couldn't take it off the artist and then not pay it to them properly.
Yeah.
But what's happening now is that big sample libraries based in the US, where they've got different copyright laws, you can sign a deal with a US sample library. They don't have that same obligation, and they can then license back to a UK artist a completely copyright and performance right free sample. And do you think there'll be, do you think that could be challenged? Where would one challenge like an international copyright dispute?
So, it's territory by territory. If you have if it's where the infringement takes place or where the contract is based, and that's the territory that you go to court in. So if you sign a deal with an American label, then you take action in the American territory.
But if say it's a vocalist who's done a sample pack, didn't realise that they aren't going to get paid if that sample's then used on a UK radio hit where a DJ sampled the record, and the exploitation is happening in the UK, would there be some UK...
I think that the sampled artist needs to have read through the terms and conditions right at the beginning, because the onus is on them to protect their own copyright.
We also had a situation with a publisher recently who was like, we reached out to, so we've had sample artists on the label, artists who've created sample packs. And so we often go back to the artist who create the sample pack and go, look, we're doing this. Would you like to be featured on it? A lot of them are women. And I feel it's another case of sort of backdoor misogyny in the music business.
And so
so we'll go back to them and say, do you want to be featured on it? And their publisher came back and said, no, we don't want to be featured, but we'll take a cut of the publishing. And I was like, I don't have to give you a cut of the publishing, and I really want to feature the artist because I want to be like, this artist is part of it. We don't have to pay you a cut of the publishing. And their response was, publishing is unassignable in Europe. You can't sign away publishing right. I was like, well, you must have done because you've signed it with this big US sample library. So
they gave the copyright to the sample library. Mm-hmm. You licensed from the sample library.
Yeah. The publisher then said, in Europe,
Yeah.
a writer cannot just give away their writing right. They can't just give it away.
But the writers assigned it to the publisher, and the publishers assigned it to the sample. So it's gone through 3 assignments there. So the copyright is protected each time it's signed. So if you've signed it from the US library and you've paid for it there, but if you then ask her to then feature on it, then on her own track that you already...
I said, look, I'll give you a share of the publishing if she features, because then we're telling a story.
Are then you then not using the original copyright that you've...
No, but then we're going to use... If we can't feature her, then there's no story there. So it's just a sample pack vocal.
Yeah.
And what's the point of...
So if rather than use a sample pack, you've gone directly to the artist.
No, we want to use the sample pack vocal, and I'll pay her... Even though we've paid for the sample library, I still want to pay her on top. But they said, we don't want the money from the master, but we do want a cut of the publishing. This is the publisher coming to me. And they publish. In the end, I said to the publisher, listen, it sounds like your issue is with the US sample library, because as far as I've...
But are you using her composition? So you're using her composition and then getting her to sing the composition?
No, she's given away this composition to the US sample library.
I understand that.
So we get to use that composition and call it our own.
Yeah.
That's it.
But what is she going to do if she features on it, other than put her name to it?
She'll get a royalty from the record label.
But you only need her to put her name to it. You're not asking her to appear on it in any way.
If she wants to be involved in the socials, all of that stuff, like be part of the record. Do you want to be part of the record?
Well, the publisher can't ask for it. I mean, I guess he's asking for a copyright split for the use of her name, right?
No, just
As
for the use of the copyright, for use of the underlying song that she created.
But you've already paid for that.
I know.
So it's a double. You can't get double.
I know.
Double dipping. That is.
Yeah, that's.
You
that's
can't get paid. No. I think you go back and say, "Here's my chain of,
That's what I did.
I went. Yeah.
Here's the terms and conditions from the US sample library,
where you assigned the music in the first place. Therefore.
Well, I mean, I don't have a copy of their terms and conditions. I've got my terms and conditions. So this says I do not have to pay. There's no.
But I'm saying the publisher has assigned those rights to.
They must have done. Yeah. So that's. But it's
these libraries are a nightmare.
Well, that's the thing, is surely there'll be like a test case where someone has an absolutely ginormous hit with one, and then they go, no, hang on a minute, this is going to...
I think that's coming. I think there are inherent problems with sample libraries that need to be ironed out. But, some part of, as we're sampling, it's a process. They've started them out. There are going to be problems, and they need to iron them out as you go, and then the law will evolve.
Because things like writing credit, it should be like this. If you've used a sample that has, vocals and a top line melody, then we're going to apportion this percentage of writing credit, and the person and the writer's already agreed that they do that. But that would seem completely fair to me.
I mean, all of those things are part of the course. Unless certainly if you want to feature an artist, you pay a different premium for that.
Yeah.
Just because you're using a name and a brand.
Absolutely.
And then, on Spotify, it becomes primary. So, and you pay a different fee for that. So...
But right now, session vocalists who are recording for sample libraries are getting less than they would as a session musician. Because as a session musician, you would still get your PPL. And if you did contribute to the writing as a session musician, the person in the session would be like, you know what, this was a bit more of a free session. I said, come up with a bass line. I did say like, oh, we're playing this song in these chords, but listen, this bass line is like, it's not quite another one bites the dust.
Session musicians, forever and ever have been paid abysmally, and that's something that, has always come up time and time again. They're not getting paid for anything. They turn up, they do a great job, and they get, a session fee.
All right, well, we're coming to the end of the podcast, and I've got 2 questions that I want to always ask each guest. So the first one is more serious. So if you could go back to the young Saranne Tardelli-Reid at the very beginning of her career in the music business, what is the one or many pieces of advice that you would give her?
It's an interesting thing, because I've actually loved my career. I have lived the dream, crashed and burnt. I've had everything, and it's been brilliant. We've flown first class, and we've just, also been in the back of a bus in the middle of nowhere. So it's been a really great career, and I've loved every bit of it. And I've worked, it started in a nightclub in Brighton, and, then we went to a label. I've been in publishing, I've been on a digital platform. So I've been in majors. So I've had a really great career in music, and I've loved it. What is hard is you've got to get a tough skin, because it's hard work. It's hard for a woman. The dance music industry particularly is 85% male. It's hard for a woman. So you've got to be strong, and you've got to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, and that sometimes feels a little bit lonely, I think. Sometimes you're like, give me a hug, someone. And it's just not that world, So, and that makes you better at your job, because it makes you strong. But it's hard to get into music, and it's hard to have a career in music, and it's hard to have a long career in music.
Yeah.
So if you've got it, you live the dream. So
is that the advice? Like, get a thicker skin and get it fast?
Get a thick skin. You know what? My advice to anyone in music is make as many contacts as you can, because they will come back time and time again. And network. And I said this to my kids, who 3 of which are in music. Get out and network from the day you can speak, because so many of those people stay in music. Some people leave. And then, the longer you're in it, they're like a big family that you've grown over time. So network at the earliest opportunity. Ask people, get advice, give advice. It's really, really useful. And live every moment. It's a great career.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic advice. And the last question, do you DJ?
I did years ago. Do I still DJ now? Very occasionally when I'm pissed. But
Okay, so imagine this. You are playing your last ever DJ set. What is the last record you're going to finish with?
So someone following me, or are we in a bar? Are we in a club?
You're in a massive party. It's your last ever DJ set. This is it. Everyone's going home after this record.
It's such a tough thing. I think I'm going to go out with a banger, right? So you're going to be like David Morales, Needing You, I don't know, Hella, Big Love, something a big, warm, everyone's going away feeling great.
Amazing. Great choices. 3 great choices, one after the other. They're not going to dragging you off the decks. I can tell that.
Oh, she's played that, damn it. How am I going to go after that?
Yeah. I'm just going to have a word with it. Just give her 3 records. All right, well, Saranne, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I've learned so much, so hopefully everyone else has too. So thank you for joining us.
Absolute pleasure for me too.
All right, cheers.
Thanks a lot.